The experience of the floor crumbling under my feet and watching my small little bug character fall and fall as the walls pass by, as the light escapes sight and darkness creeps in, with the music fading and the sounds of scuttling and horror replacing its absence, is one of a kind. That sinking feeling, realising there's no easy way out, looking at the map hoping I've looped to an already discovered area but knowing there's not going to be a single line on that piece of paper. Of course, I'm talking about Deepnest. The deep in its name is obvious given the drop we just descended down, but nest. What is it nesting? What's behind the noises? What is hidden within the walls? From the moment you're introduced you want to get out, whether it's due to tripping your arachnophobia, claustrophobia, or general disdain for untrustworthy scenarios. And the problem is, you can't. At least not if you fell in like I did. Instead, you're forced to find your way around. My first time with Deepnest was one hell of an experience. I fell in, I landed, and I managed to take every turn possible to move further and further away from Conifer, so for a lot of my time spent down there, I didn't have a map, but instead I had to build out this world in my own head and try and map it out that way, and I have a terrible sense of direction, so that just went horribly. But after all was said and done, and I finally beat the Deepnest and escaped, I found myself having enjoyed that area. No, I didn't really want to go back in, but if I had to, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I appreciated its part in the world, in Hallownest, the lore that came from it, and the unique moments tied only to it. The thing is, Deepnest fans exist, they're insane but they're real. Bilewater fans are liars and don't exist. Bilewater is the closest thing to Deepnest in Silksong, but I don't believe it was intended to be this game's version of said area. But due to its nature, I wanted to dive deep into both and discuss why Deepnest works and its comparison to Bilewater. Let's start with a couple of similarities, starting with what I briefly mentioned, the discovery of the areas. With Deepnest, each entrance provokes the player in a different way. You fall in and you think, fuck, I need to get out. How do I get out? You walk in after the mantis fight and there's a giant pile of corpses and you realise that whatever's beyond this point, it was the mantis lords that were in charge of preventing them escaping. You traverse down from Fog Canyon and you immediately find Conifer. He's not humming, he's terrified. What in the world could scare him this bad? And what are you prepared to do to stop them? But each path you take leads to the same train of thought. What is Deepnest? It sets to unnerve, but like every white guy in a horror movie, you can't help but want to find out. Bilewater also has a couple of entry points. The more common one is via Sinner's Road. A fitting name, given it would allow sinners to avoid being judged on their route up to the Holy Citadel. The alternate route into Bilewater is via the Whispering Vaults of the Citadel itself. Given this requires the player to reach Act 2 and to have ventured a fair way through the Citadel to get to the vaults, as well as having multiple abilities unlocked like the double jump and the claw line, which the player does not need in order to arrive through Sinner's Road, it's more likely that people will discover it via this route. Either way, arriving into Bilewater gives a similar sense of awe about its dilapidated design as Deepnest does with its dreariness. Whereas Deepnest raises the question of what's nesting within, Bilewater's name is a bit more of a mystery. This isn't water, it's acidic looking, teeming with maggots. Was it always like this? Was it always called Bilewater? Well, maybe not, as the lore implies that although it's not literal bile, the murky waters that flood this area is from the belly of Farloom, from the Citadel itself. Waste of those above, allowing their rot to seep and infect the once clear running water, polluting the environment and causing the bugs to adapt in ways that us as the players find frustrating. Taking it away from the lore and into gameplay, and this is where one of the first issues arises with Bilewater, the environment. The pools of waste that if you fall into causes your shell to then be infected with maggots. This debuff can only be managed by wasting a heal or resting at a bench. So it's going to be like that then. Traps, benches and runbacks is what Bilewater is infamously known for. Benches are supposed to be your saving grace, and as we all know, when a game betrays your trust it's hard to get it back. Sinner's Road has a bench that gets stuck due to the mechanism being jammed with the worms and the maggots. In order to fix it you need to climb up the side and break a wall, and it's a neat little bit of world design there. I liked it. But then the very next area plays the same trick, except this time the bench is rendered useless. Bilewater is a large area, and with a lack of benches, a lack of safety, and paired with the traps I mentioned before, you begin to understand why this area is infamous. The thing is, Deepnest also has a trick bench. You can find it on the left hand side in the distant village. The villagers spur you on to take a seat, and as you do, you realise you're stuck. The villagers then move in and you pass out before waking up in a new room, tied up in a web alongside other victims of their trick. The thing is, this doesn't actually move you too far from the bench, and you can go back and still claim that bench afterwards. There's also a stag station to the right of the village as well. As well as that, it's also pretty obvious that the bench is a trap. The clue is in the music. It's not the only trick either. The sad whimper of a lost and alone grub can pull you in, and as you manage to get over to save it and have it return to its grub father, it turns. This heart-stopping moment was another moment. A moment of panic as you realise Team Cherry have managed to pull another fast one on you, all in the same area. And it doesn't stop there. Parasites bring corpses back for a round 2, leaving you standing in fear as you wait to see if this bug is going to reanimate or not, paired with scuttling noises as well as enemies moving in the foreground, and it becomes horrific. Bilewater's trick bench forces you into a pool of waste, so there's no avoiding it. Also, the player most likely is desperate for a bench at this point. I mean, look at the distance between this area and the last bench. But it's okay because a bench must be around the corner, right?
I love the pain.
There's a secret bench, and I'd love to know how many people buckled on their blind playthrough and googled if there was another bench in this area. I know I did. It's hidden behind a breakable wall, followed by traps, pools of stink water, but it does make the final thing in Bilewater a little bit more bearable. The run back. As I start the run back for the boss, let me go back to Deepnest. Hollow Knight has a lot of great things going for it. But one of them is not Nosk, the boss of Deepnest. Nosk's arena is poorly designed for the attacks he does, which is very few but still very annoying. That being charging back and forth and spewing venom at you and spreading it across the arena. But it can't be disputed that the build up to Nosk is great, and certainly sets him as one of the most unique bosses in the game. As you're surviving the caves, you see you, another knight, and just as you start to approach, it leads to the next room. Before this point, you come across NPCs like Zote, Quirrell and Hornet that have some resemblance to the knight but still worlds apart, with Zote being the closest based on his size and the shape of his shell. You may have assumed at this point that whatever you are, you're alone. Possibly from a distant land given the intro scene, but seeing an exact copy of you probably wasn't what you were expecting. I know I wasn't. Everything I was doing until that point got pushed to the side and I focused on finding this other me. And upon finding it, and then being locked in, and then a battle starting, I realised that no matter what I ended up walking away thinking about Deepnest, I was always going to look at this as a great moment in this game. Oh, and we're finally here. Grohl. I know I just gave some of you severe flashbacks, and I'm sorry. To give him his full title, Grohl the Great. It's ironic, given he's sitting at the bottom of a lot of tier lists, and is a direct competitor for the worst boss in the game, competing with Savage Beastfly of course. For a moment, let's forget about everything else, the run back, the gauntlet before, and the lore, and let's focus on what we have as an actual boss fight. Grohl spits acid that deals double damage. He dives in and out of the water, which if contact's made, double damage. He activates traps throughout the fight and gets his goons to jump in as well. He tries to suck you in, which can pull you off platforms and into the water. He also casts the Vengeful Spirit spell from the first game. This, then tied with the arena, leads to a somewhat frustrating fight. Being soaked even just once can be the difference between an all-important heal and death. Is it avoidable? Yes, but not easily. There is a method to cheese this boss, which has the player sitting in the corner of the swamp, which renders Grohl pretty much useless, and as long as you're patient and place your attacks appropriately, you can see this fight out once and for all. I'd be lying if I said I beat this boss the intended way. I instead embraced the swamp and I cheesed that bitch, but once that was done, did it feel good? No. Would I have felt good if I had beat this boss legit? Still no. This isn't a fight, this is a painful torture that I wasn't capable of withstanding any longer. If it was just the fight itself, I may have kept trying, but it's not. It's the combination of the tedious run back, the random enemy spawns with hit and run gimmicks, the traps and the swamps. Then all of that to be followed by a gauntlet beforehand. I was lucky to get to the boss with most of my health. Skill issue, possibly, but this can't be excused. I mentioned the secret bench, making this run back a bit easier, but it's not the only way to make it easier. The Wreath of Purity is a tool that allows the bearer to swim in the waters of Bilewater for a very limited time without becoming infested. This is a game changer. The problem is though, it's found in the putrefied ducts. Why is this a problem? Before I answer that, I want to go back to Deepnest. Deepnest is exactly that, deep. It's void of light in a lot of areas, so much so that seeing a meter in front of you is considered good. The rooms themselves are pitch black. To negate this and help you see, you require the lantern. It can be bought incredibly early on after having Sly move up from the Forgotten Crossroads up to Dirtmouth where he sets up a shop. The description of the item clearly states that it brightens dark caverns, but it's expensive so you might want to hold off on getting it immediately. However, there are multiple areas in the early game levels that are like Deepnest and require the lantern to aid in navigating the halls. This early exposure was enough for me to want to go save my Geo and buy it as soon as possible. Therefore, when I did reach Deepnest, its darkness was nullified and it was one less thing for me to have to worry about. Despite Bilewater being accessible in Act 1, the putrefied ducts where you find the Wreath of Purity isn't until Act 2. I will say though that Bilewater is limited, as you can't progress much more without certain abilities, so you're likely to come back in Act 2 with double jump at least. However, Putrefied Ducts is a hidden optional area. I didn't realise it even existed until after beating Act 2 and Grandmother Silk. These games are Metroidvanias, and so my experience will differ from yours and many others. I didn't find the Wreath until very late game after beating Grohl already, but I bought the lantern before Deepnest. Others will have this reversed and had to wander around in darkness whilst being gifted the ability of not needing to worry about maggots as much. However, that being said, I don't think it's great design to have an item that helps in multiple levels locked away in a hidden optional area that some may not find. It's not an item that trivialises the gimmick either, it breaks after being in the water too much, requiring you to then go back to the bench to get it fixed. It wasn't until after doing everything there was in the game that I came to the realisation of this, but Bilewater is not a bad area. Shocking, I know, leave your comment saying yes officer, this is him. Whilst you're down there you might as well subscribe. But in all seriousness, Deepnest works because the complete package is right there in Deepnest. Everything from the world design that tells you this place is supposed to remain only there, to the design of the bugs. Not just enemies but NPCs like Midwife having a creepy design. The elements of surprise that keep you on edge, the darkness and the mazes, the very ground you walk on being a danger. It's intended to scare you, to be creepy, to be Deepnest. But that also includes the music, and the music of Bilewater is completely different to the package it sets out to deliver. It's a disgusting area. It's supposed to be. The bugs here seep pollution, the water itself looks like it's decaying, but the music does not tell that same story. Instead, it's a melody of grief and tranquility, hope almost. Yeah, I'm gonna be that guy, but the lore is what changes my mind on this area. I've already mentioned it, but the reason why Bilewater is because of the Citadel. The waste would be poured into this once clean area, and Grohl, the chief of this tribe, would attempt to stop them polluting his kingdom. He even paired with the Snail Shaman, but ended up killing him to harness more power, either out of greed or an attempt to single-handedly take on the Citadel. Of course, it wasn't enough, and as a result the bugs had to adapt, if not they die. The bodies of Citadel members can be found strung up, a clear warning to others travelling through that they're not welcome here. I've seen a theory somewhere that the trap bench is actually designed by the tribe as a way to rid of the Citadel's people passing through. If you follow Chakra's quest, you eventually have to follow the trail of her master. It takes you through a once blocked path and to a tranquil paradise, with clean running water, and the dirty green palette is diluted into fresh, clean greys. This is a very small insight into what Bilewater used to be. Beautiful.
Oh, now I'm more scared.
To me, it's a level that will be hated in the moment, but appreciated in memory. I don't think I will ever enjoy Bilewater whilst I'm playing through it, but I will always love it in hindsight. for the story that it tells through its design, the lore and the music. It's similar to the Simone fight in Nier Automata, in the sense that perspective shifts the narrative. The first time you fight her, you see her as a boss and you want to get rid of her as quickly as possible so you don't get added to her collection. But from another perspective, you start to learn the truth. That she's a struggling machine, fighting for the approval of someone that won't even look at her. Where Deepnest shines is with the experience it gives you when playing. From the moment you stumble across it to the second you leave, it's haunting, creepy, and exactly everything it needs to be Deepnest. Bilewater has questionable design choices, horrific runbacks and a tedious boss, but all by design. It's deliberate, the same way Deepnest is deliberate. If it wasn't, the music would be much more suited to the area, rather than having the player question the rift between what they're hearing and what they're playing. Instead, it's a harsh conflict between heavenly music and hell of an area. By lore and by world design, Bilewater is supposed to be disgusting. Why would it make you enjoy that? It's a reflection of what the population had to go through, torture and torment. We see Verdania as it was in its prime, now called Lost Verdania. I hope that with DLC possibly, we're able to revisit what Bilewater used to be, before the plague that was the Citadel's pollution mutating it. It would be a perfect area to visit in a dream sequence, one that would shift perspective, and even for those not really interested in the lore or the story, would be a clear indicator that Bilewater was not always vile. What are your thoughts on this area? Do you hate it? Did the lore make any difference to how you felt? Or did you enjoy the area? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on it. Thanks for watching, I really appreciate it. Leaving a like and subscribing if you want. Take care and have a good one.